About 8 years ago now, I made a video called Rejection is the Story of My Life. It's one of my most popular videos. I just rewatched it this week, and I'll be honest, some parts are a little bit embarrassing. So while my experience of rejection was real and painful, my strategy at the time was objectively terrible. I've clearly come a long way since then, learning a lot about myself and the world, but how about now? Is rejection still the story of my life? The answer is sort of. Yes and no. That was very early on in my autism discovery journey, so clearly a lot has happened since then. Hi everyone, Paul Micallef here from Autism from the Inside. I make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism, so make sure you hit subscribe to get the latest content. So this Rejection is the Story of My Life video from way back in 2016 was the first video I ever made that got any serious traction. At the time, most of my videos were getting maybe a couple of hundred views tops. But this one went on to get 1,000, and then 10,000, and then 50,000. And today I just checked and it's at nearly 800,000, which absolutely blows my mind. Clearly, something in that video hit a nerve with a lot of people. One of my favorite sayings is, if you feel like you're alone, you're not alone in feeling alone. In other words, lots of other people have similar experiences. It's just that we don't know because we don't talk about it. Most people just suffer in silence, or even if they do tell someone about it, the experience is mostly internal and not easy to see from the outside. So that original video was over 8 years ago. What about now? Is rejection still the story of my life? Short answer, yes and no. It's really not that simple. The whole narrative has changed so much that attempting any kind of direct comparison just feels ridiculous. It's as if every individual detail has changed, but the underlying pattern is still the same. The main difference is I now have a much better way of understanding my experience and figuring out how to navigate difficult situations. So if you haven't seen the original video, I'll leave a link in the cards somewhere or in the description or something so that you can check it out for yourself. So I just rewatched it for myself this week, and it was a little bit difficult, to be honest. I feel like I've clearly come a long way since then. While I recognize my face in the videos, it's almost as if the person talking is not really me. Like it's a previous version of myself who I haven't been in some time. Which makes sense. It was 8 years ago. Lots happens in that time. I've clearly come a long way in my understanding of myself and of the world around me. But probably the biggest difference has been in understanding the dynamics of the behavior I was describing. I noticed that when I used the word rejection, I actually meant a couple of different things. I meant the feeling of invalidation, of not being seen, of trying to explain myself to others and not being believed. That's one thing that makes up a significant part of my experience. Then there's asking for help, trying to reach out and lean on people, but finding no support. And as we'll see later, this comes down to the way I was masking and the kind of relationships I was trying to build. There's also the experience of ostracism, being systematically ignored in the hope that I will go away. Maybe you can relate to that. I still experience that to this day. And finally, I didn't speak about this directly in the video, presumably because I was still developing my own understanding of it, but autistic masking was clearly also a big factor. In other words, modifying my behavior based on what I imagine other people need to feel comfortable. A lot of that is still true. I still experience ostracism, I still struggle with masking and unmasking, and finding a balance to determine when and where it's safe to be myself and let my guard down. It's also still a challenge to ask for help, and to explain myself to others in a way that leaves me feeling seen. So in a way, all of that stuff is still the same. The big change though is in the meta-narrative around what all these things mean. Who am I in this situation? How do I respond to these factors in the world? And the answer today is, well, quite differently than I did 8 years ago. Firstly, I do not feel the same level of rejection today as I did back then, even if a lot of the external factors are the same. And there are many reasons for this, but one big one is that I simply let go of a lot of terrible relationships. Previously, I was holding on, clinging on to relationships that, one, weren't that good, and two, weren't getting any better. In a way, I'd already tested the friendship many times over. It consistently failed, but I just kept giving it more chances. I basically had to accept that these relationships were just not going to get any better. I had to either accept them as they are or just let them go. So I did both. It was very hard, but I accepted that they were not what I wanted, and I let them go. Ironically, this actually saved some of my friendships. Instead of constantly being upset that the relationship was just not what I wanted it to be, I could just be okay and enjoy the little that was there without constantly trying to make it into more. In hindsight, I've obviously destroyed a lot of relationships by wanting more, by being unhappy with what we've got and trying to push the relationship to be something that it was just never meant to be. Don't get me wrong, letting go of a relationship is really hard to do and often incredibly painful, but as I realized, also 100% necessary in order to develop better, healthier, more fulfilling relationships. And thankfully, it did get easier. As I slowly started making better, healthier relationships, it became easier and easier to say no to the terrible ones. In other words, once I started to get a taste of what good felt like, it was a lot easier to recognize and avoid the bad ones. In fact, with just 1 or 2 good, solid, affirming, stable relationships, it became much easier to deal with the constant misunderstanding and the ostracism in general from the outside world. People still ignored me, people still misjudged me, but suddenly I just didn't care as much. They couldn't hurt me anymore. It was like I had some kind of protective layer between me and the outside world. Previously, it was as if I was trying to pick up a hot pan from the stove with my bare hands. I'd get burned every time and I would curse the pan for being so intolerably hot. Now I had protective gloves. I could pick up the pan. I could go and interact with the outside world without getting burned. The pan is just as hot, the world was just as hostile, but suddenly it didn't bother me so much. And all it took, as if it's a small thing, all it took was learning what healthy relationships look like and actually discovering and feeling that difference for myself. This is where masking and unmasking come in. There's a point in the video where I emphasize that it was the first time I asked for help in a relationship where it broke down. And I was clearly very angry about this at the time. It just wasn't fair. I've helped you so many times, and then when I one day ask for something in return, the answer is no. How ridiculously unfair is that? I'm almost embarrassed watching that again now. I clearly had no idea how reciprocal relationships worked, how they're built, or how they're maintained. To put the misconception of my previous belief in perspective, imagine if I'd said, I've never once in my whole life tried to play the violin, and then the very first time I try, it didn't work. The violin just wouldn't make the right sound, even though this is the very first time I've needed it to. How unfair is that? In hindsight, it seems incredible. I mean, how did I expect to never, ever, ever ask for help in my whole life, and then somehow it was magically going to work the first time I tried? It's a little bit counterintuitive, or at least it was for me, but the people who are the most likely to help when I need it are the people that I've already asked for help 100 times before. And conversely, the people least likely to help are those who I've never asked before. Relationships are not like some kind of savings account where I just deposit a little bit every week, again and again and again, building it up slowly over time, in the hope that one day there'll be enough to live on when I eventually have to withdraw the money. Instead, I need to practice asking for small things, and then eventually asking for bigger things, and then one day when I'm desperate and I really need help, I'll be practiced at asking and my friends will be practiced at giving. And this is where unmasking comes in. I can't expect to just one day take off the mask and hope that everyone will suddenly celebrate the new me. I need to practice taking off the mask to build up my skill of taking it off over time. I've practiced masking. I'm quite good at it. I've done it my whole life. It works well. It's been developed over years. What makes me think that developing the skill of unmasking should take less time or less practice? If a relationship works when I'm wearing the mask, I need to practice creating a relationship that works when I take off the mask. And the same is true for the other person. They have practiced dealing with me in a certain way while I've been wearing the mask. They need to practice dealing with me when I'm not wearing the mask. And it's very unlikely that they'll get it on the first try. In fact, if I put my relationship through a test like that by suddenly taking off the mask one day, then the relationship likely won't be ready, likely won't be strong enough, and will probably fail. Just like a muscle, we strengthen our relationships by working them and stressing them on a regular basis. When we use them a little every day, they get stronger and stronger. more and more able to withstand greater and greater load. And the stronger a relationship is, the more I can trust that I can lean on it for support because I already have many times before. So my previous strategy, which I described in that original video, was that when I was desperate, I would reach out to everyone. Won't someone please help me? And then people would scatter like a school of fish just moving out of my way. I thought that casting my net really wide and asking lots and lots and lots and lots of people would increase my chances of finding someone to say yes, to respond, to actually be able to help. But a better strategy would have been to reach out to one person or a few people, carefully selected individuals with whom I have a relationship that is strong enough that they are able to respond. If I ask 100 acquaintances, none of them are going to have a strong enough relationship to bear the load without breaking. I could ask 1,000 instead of 100 and my odds still wouldn't improve very much. So while my experience of rejection was real and painful, my strategy at the time was objectively terrible. I was setting myself up for almost certain failure and I didn't know it. So is rejection still the story of my life? Well, no, I probably wouldn't put it like that anymore. I still experience ostracism and misunderstanding on a regular basis. I often feel invisible, like I'm an alien floating through another existence, choosing every so often to land and interact with the natives for a little bit. But the experience doesn't feel like rejection anymore. Understanding the dynamics of reciprocal relationships helps me to avoid wasting time and energy on strategies that were doomed from the get-go. So I still haven't really found a place to belong, and yes, that is still something I'm looking for, but I'm also just more comfortable doing my own thing and feeling okay about that. For example, I've taken to wearing these huge over-ear earmuffs, right, at the shopping center every time I go to get groceries. They're great. I don't think people really care, and if they do, it doesn't bother me. I've accepted that not everyone will see me, and that's okay. And if they do take the time to look closer, ask more, get to know me a bit better, maybe they'll think I'm interesting, or maybe they'll think I'm weird, and really, who cares either way? At this point in my autism journey, I'm feeling more and more comfortable unmasking, especially around certain special people. And with that unmasking, with that self-acceptance, and by practicing that unmasking, practicing that self-acceptance, it opens up the possibility of being accepted by other people as well, which goes a very, very long way to trying to combat this previous rejection narrative. So anyway, that is my story so far. It'll be interesting to come back to this video in 10 years' time and see what else has changed. As usual, I'm curious to hear your story. Do you feel like rejection is the story of your life? And how has that changed in the process of discovering your own autism and learning how to unmask? Please leave a comment if you can. Otherwise, thanks again for watching. I hope you liked this video and I will see you again next week. Bye.